sessions. If you've been rocking with us for a while, you know that this is something that we do regularly here at the Brook. And if you're just discovering us, just so you know, Q&R is a space where we pitch and catch on questions that are curated directly from members and friends of the Brook. So we're gonna get into a really dope discussion around culture and this thing called life in the context of our identity as believers. And just so you know, this again is curated by questions sent in by you guys. So if you do have questions that pop up that you'd like to see featured on future editions of Q&R sessions, you can text them directly to the number on the screen, 786-321-7090, and we'll be sure to get into those in future discussions. You guys ready to jump right in?
Yeah. Yes.
Let's get it.
All right. Question 1 is, how would you encourage someone who's always been moving and they can't come to grips with having a home? Home feels foreign. How can they rest?
That's a good one.
Since it's a good one, you should start us off. I mean,
I think with anything that you're trying to encourage someone else with, it needs to start with understanding kind of where they're coming from, their paradigm. So if they are not thinking of home as something settled, are they not thinking of home as this? Are they thinking of home? You know, ask them questions to get kind of where their thought and where their mind is regarding the topic, specifically with this one, home. And then from there, I would say pray. Definitely pray. Like, God, whatever your definition is of this thing, in this context, home, what is it that you would desire for that person? Like, what is it that you want for them, Lord? Let them see you, blah, 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 all the things. But it has to come with awareness and understanding where they're coming from, because it may be more or less than what you think, or just a different angle. So that's my first thought.
Jumping in on the awareness piece, I think part of it is trying to be honest and intentional regarding what is the roots of restlessness, right? So like if there's this feeling of restlessness where you're not necessarily rooted, you feel, or not even just feel, but you are moving from place to place. Like, what are the roots behind that? Like, it's kind of what you're driving towards, and I think that's key, because some of it may just be seasonal and circumstantial, where like, man, like life is just a blitz right now, so I'm just trying to like hang on for dear life, and so it's like, all right, let's kind of deal with the circumstances and create rhythms that address kind of the moment that you're in. But if it's something deeper than just circumstances, there's something happening in my heart, akin to the whole Augustine, you've made us for yourself, and we're restless until we rest in you dynamic. If there's something else going on, then we need to address the root, because that's how you really answer the question of, well, how can we find rest? How can we actually put roots down that allow us to grow and experience rest in life, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I think, well, I grew up, my dad was in the military.
Yeah.
So I moved a lot and I don't have a childhood home that, I can always go back to. So I don't know that feeling either. It's not something that I'm like, oh, I know what that feels like. Home for me always felt like family, because I think it's really more a conversation of belonging. Like, do you belong somewhere, right? And it's like that scene in Thor.
Yeah, where, Asgard is a people.
Asgard is a people. Like, and that's so that feels like home to me. Like, there are people that feel like home. There are communities, that's or really memories even that feel like home. And so I feel like for this person, if you are in a space where you're trying to find home, here's the beautiful thing about this is that you can create that. Like, you can live in a space where you can be a part of people that feel like home. Like, you can belong somewhere without having necessarily a physical location of like, this is my house, this is my home. And for me, like, when I even now, like, I feel like as an adult, I created my own like physical space of home that I'm like very attached to, because I'm like, this feels like, but I created that as an adult. So don't feel like because you didn't come from it that it's not something that isn't available to you, because you can definitely create that.
Yeah.
That's good. Can I ask you? Oh, jump in.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you're married and this is you, it's married? Also... Oh, yes, honey. I'm
Okay.
married.
You say honey again because people can see you. So I just want, as they look at you,
Focusing.
they know that they should look
She's
to the
married.
right of
Okay.
you. Let them know.
Okay.
Let them know.
And you're going to encourage him.
Yes.
No, but seriously, if you are married and this is a question that either resonates with you or you sent it in, remembering that as you're building the home, you're coming together to build it. So if this is one person saying, hey, in the awareness, I need you to come to my specific perspective and it has to be exactly the way that I understand home to be, then that's not going to work either. So yes, build it no matter what stage of life you're in. But if you are married, and I would even say in a roommate situation, there, especially if you are amicable and you guys can come together to create space, create a rhythm, and in your actual space, you talked about people, but I'm also talking about the space. You really have to think of the other person and where they're coming from.
That's really good.
And then marriage triples it because it's more than just the space. So
And more than just you. I also want to speak to the part that says home feels foreign, because it should feel foreign. Like,
What do you mean?
I mean, like we're not actually from here. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
in terms
Oh,
of
so
our
you about to
citizenship.
preach.
Well, I just mean that
No, go ahead.
there should feel like an element that we are striving towards making a home that in the context that we can on this side of eternity. But there should be a longing for something better. So I just want to acknowledge that if there's a reason that it feels foreign, not that it should feel, you should feel dissatisfied or a true lack of contentment across the board. But I think there's always that space that feels like, oh, there's actually more than this. And that's also a very beautiful thing too, is it because it forces you to seek God and it forces you to ask, okay, God, what does home look like in the context of your desires for me? And then you can kind of use that as a foundational piece to build a home, whether it's in the context of marriage or with yourself or with your church.
This is gonna be good. I'm just out here. I don't have my journal, so I can't take notes. So I'm really frustrated. But
When
this-
I think
y'all-
it's okay.
y'all-
You can watch the recording later. It's okay.
I'm going to and be like, I have so many
Are
other
there
questions
more,
this
Corey?
provokes.
There are more, and as you have those questions when you're reflecting later, you can text them into.
That was. I see what
I
you did
see
there,
what you
Corey.
did.
Looking
Well
all
done.
sharp,
Text those
my
le-
brother.
Hey, I do what I can. I like
Looking
the
sharp,
coordination, by
accent
the
sharp.
way, man.
Listen,
Iron sharpens iron.
it does, and then the
Also
copper tone, and then it's just smooth on.
Should
your
we
skin.
have a whole moment too?
I know.
Why are you stealing our vibes?
I don't know.
You are stealing
Anyway,
our vibes. I'm sorry, we're
continue.
distracted. This is
We have
dangerous.
it.
Let's
No,
keep
but how
it pushing.
fun.
We're gonna get into
Keep it
this
pushing.
next question here. Number 2, after you follow God's instruction and are obedient and nothing happens, what should you do next?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it presupposes other questions and ideas, right? So, without assuming intent in the question, it's almost framed as if obedience is a key that unlocks something, right? Like it's kind of like formulaic. I do this and now X happens. And that's not the way I think God primarily talks about obedience or invites us to think about obedience, that less of a formula to, like a secret code that you access something because of it, as much as that outworking of relationship. And so if obedience is primarily the outworking of faith and relationship, then there's always going to be something on the other side of it. It just may not be the thing that you want. So does that make sense? So let me pull back and say, if I am obeying to try and create a particular outcome, or I'm obeying and I'm tying my obedience to a specific outcome, then I would say just maybe pause a bit and reconsider the heart of the obedience, if that makes sense. That's what you should do next is, if nothing happens, like, all right, let me step back and say, well, what was I obeying for? Why was I obeying? What was driving this? Was this driven by a sense of duty? Was this driven by a desire to get something from God? Or was this driven by delight and faith and the nature of obedience, which is relationship?
Right.
That would be my response.
For sure.
Felt like I had to put super
No.
pastor hat
But I
on,
think this
or
is such a
whatever.
loaded
It's
question,
very loaded.
right? Because you are assuming that God promised you something in the obedience. He might have just said, do it. He didn't say what would happen on the other end. He just said, do it. And so this is where so for me, it's like, if you are obedient and nothing's happening, what you do, yell, scream. I don't care. Do whatever you want. Do it, like, yell and scream. Because it's more about, like, sometimes we think that these moments are character building, but I think they're really character revealing. So if you are yelling and screaming.
That's what we are on today. What?
Well, I think if you're yelling and screaming.
Did you wait for that moment?
Did I wait for
that? Was that off the cuff? It was just so good.
Well, I'm just saying, like, I think that if you do yell and scream, and I'm talking specifically about me, right? Because there are certain things that I do feel like I've been obedient for, and God has caused me to wait. In those moments of yelling and screaming, I'm going, why am I yelling and screaming? Like, because it's revealing something inside of me that really, like, needs to be dealt with so that my relationship with God can be stronger, because maybe that was the whole reason to be obedient, so he could reveal, Tracy, listen, your patience is not great. Your trust is not great. Your faith is not great. And those are moments really to build into the foundation of your relationship with God, not necessarily to just always come with, and we can ask God for things, sure, but sometimes the action that we're taking in obedience isn't always because God's going to give you something on the other side. Sometimes it's because he wants to form you and mold you into the person that you're supposed to be, and that's going to require some of these moments where you're not so patient. Like, you're going to be given the opportunity to build that character and to build that faith muscle.
Yeah. This whole conversation, I think it's given me such compassion for people that I'm thinking about right now. And just how that there's that expectancy. I even have compassion for my children. I'm like, I don't know why you're confused. What I said is what it is, and it needs to be done.
Very clear.
I don't know what the confusion
right
is.
now, all the way, joy in your heart, obey.
Thank you.
Very clear.
See how that reveals their character?
Yeah,
You're like,
it
you
really
are
does.
sinful.
Yeah,
very much so,
at the
teenager.
same time, hearing all of this, I'm like, man, that is not me. Like, it's very much, we are children of God, always maturing, growing, walking in the maturity that we should be growing towards year and day after. But you just have a different compassion when you start really seeing, oh man, God has much to reveal as he grows us forward. So yeah.
Would it be a fair? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead, Corey.
I'm
Jump
sorry.
in.
I had to get this off
You-
my heart.
Get-
As you guys
get
are
it out
sitting
of
here
there, brother.
bubbling up, and it's just
Get it out of there.
As you guys are speaking, and Diamond, you kind of hit on that point of like becoming, right? Like we're all, no matter our age, space, and like we're all becoming in the eyes of God. And it made me think of a quote by Inky Johnson, who, if you know him, man of God, ex-standout college football player turned motivational speaker. And he was like, what's more important in life, what we acquire or who we become?
Come on.
And, the things that we want to acquire are often very important to us. Like, right? Like we want things, God made this stuff for us, right? Like we want to reach goals and get things, but who are we becoming in the process of being obedient to what God's called us to?
And that's really where the bulk of the journey lies. It's in the becoming part. And I also, for whoever wrote this, I want to encourage you, like, we're not saying that God does not answer prayers or God doesn't,
For sure. There's
show up.
blessing
There's
attached to
blessing attached to obedience.
Absolutely.
Yes, it's just sometimes, your waiting might seem a little bit longer, but, just like it says in Galatians, you just got to keep going, right? Don't grow weary in doing well. In due time, you will reap a harvest. And we don't know when that due time is, because life is seasonal. God is, the cycles and seasons, the seed time and harvest principle of what God is doing in you and through you. We just don't always know that timeline.
That's good. So if I could synthesize what I'm hearing, because this is really good for me. Like, what do you do next? Well, one, you express yourself in whatever way that looks like.
That's
God's
important.
not intimidated by our emotions,
That's
and so
important.
we could come to him freely. Two, you evaluate, right? Like, what was I expecting?
Yeah.
And is that okay?
And why was I expecting
Why?
this?
So I should take a moment and evaluate, and then the next, there's no E. I don't have another E. I don't have another E. But the next is take the opportunity to go deeper into who God is forming you through your
Explore.
obedience.
That's it.
Explore. Guys, this is crazy. We just wrote a book. We just wrote a book.
What was the first one?
It was express, evaluate, and explore.
explore.
What do you do?
We are smart.
After obedience, you express, you evaluate, you explore, and you can now give at the.
Oh
What?
my God.
So into this book. So into this book.
I love
That's
it.
crazy.
I love it.
All right.
I love it.
And then we have the Eke Johnson, so it's 4 E's, but it's who's counting?
There
Who's
it
counting?
is.
Nobody's counting.
Question number 3. Let's get into it. The waiting is prolonged and my heart is empty. My thoughts say that I can't be a depressed and weary Christian, but I know deep down that I can be. How do I keep fighting through the pain and emptiness? Steve.
That's real deep.
I think the tone of this question is heavy, but it's not disconnected from everything that we just said.
Right.
Yeah, that's really good.
It's just one of our members and speakers at the church recently said that, like, I want to be tender as I speak to you and I enter into your pain. Like, I don't want to be trivial with that. And so with that same sentiment, all of what we said is still true. It really, really is. What is God revealing to you in this empty season? What is God showing you? And then if he's not showing you anything, that's very much a big quotation, then what questions are you asking? Are you still going to him? Are you empty? Because there's so many implicative questions on the context of how you're actually relating to God in this space in light of everything that we just said with number 2. And we all are different. Some people are more prone to be more melancholy, may be critical, and it is a gift being able to refine spaces, but it also can drag them down into pits if the enemy or even just self-pity gets a hold of it and it just turns into a whole nother thing. So those are real things that you have to address, and Psalm 24:1 includes knowledge, it includes science, so whatever you got to do, that is what you need to take steps for yourself, do that. But it's not disconnected from anything that we just said. It's just a very tender space, because who knows what you're asking for? Healing from a very fatal disease. It may not be money. It may just be peace. It may be
relationship.
Who knows? But it's not disconnected. So.
Yeah, that's good. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, but maybe even from a different angle. I definitely think we have to define waiting well, right? So waiting isn't or shouldn't be synonymous with the absence of activity, right? Like that's not the way the scriptures encourage us to wait. But I would also say, in defining waiting well, we'll see that waiting is the heritage of God's people. Like it's like their holy heritage. It's what you almost sign up for when you step into the faith and you believe the gospel. Like, God says, here you go. And part of the angle I've been thinking about regarding waiting is how not only is it our holy heritage, but as we wait, we enter into an experience that God has. Like God waits. This is the way Peter talks, how he is long-suffering and he's patient and he endures, that the scriptures talk about at the right time, Jesus died for the ungodly. Like, there's a way in which God waits. Jesus is waiting now. Creation is waiting on God, and God is waiting for the moment where he says, all right, full on renewal. And so in our waiting, there's a way that we experience God, not just trusting him, but who he is like, that we can't experience outside of it. And so just defining waiting well, I think matters. But then the last piece I would say, to kind of pass it to you just so you could jump in. It says, my thoughts say that I can't be a depressed and weary Christian. I would love to. You can. So it almost is like when I see my thoughts say, what I import to that, right or wrong, is I have a theology that says that I can't.
That I'm not allowed to.
That I'm not allowed. And
feel.
it's like, yo, that's not. That's absolute. So there's this entire book in the Bible called Lamentations, where you have this depressed and weary follower of God, and what is. And it wasn't depressed or weary without reason.
Right.
Like, there was like good reason. And what was super profound about this is how in the book of Lamentations, God is noticeably and honestly, in a very stunning fashion, silent. And it's as if he's centering the voice of the one who is lamenting.
Yeah.
Because that's not a space that we naturally step
Yeah.
into, because we're like, oh, I'm not allowed to do that. And it's like, no, like that is a space God has carved out for us to step into, because again, he can meet us in that moment where it does feel empty, and we do feel like, super sad, where sadness is our primary emotion. God can meet us in that. So there's nothing wrong with you. There's no scripture that says you can't be this.
Right.
In fact, God has multiple scriptures of people who
And
are
examples.
this.
Yeah.
And then it says, here's how you exist when that's your story. But yeah.
No, I think, to your point, like the full spectrum of human emotion exists in the stories that are told in the Bible. So
Yeah.
we see depression, we see weariness, we see sadness, we see in the same way that we see joy. When it reminds me of that story in 1 Kings where Elijah is like, listen, these people are not listening. Like, I'm tired. Just kill me now. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. And
And it was sincere.
right, and it was
He was like,
this is
take
it.
me out.
Right, I'm good. And God was like, well, take a nap and here's a snack and you'll be fine. But because God cares more than you know, and God also
So
knows what you need more than you know what you
really
need.
good. Absolutely.
But sometimes I think in these moments, and just to break it down scientifically for a second, the way that our cells operate is our cells go, oh, we're depressed now? We're just going to continue to be depressed.
Yeah.
Because biologically, the emotion, like the physiological hormones that exist with depression and anxiety or whatever, only last for 90 seconds. The problem is that we have one thought that lasts 90 seconds, then we follow that up with another thought. So now we're in another 90 seconds, and then we're going to follow it up with another. So now
you
we're in
just
a
start
cycle.
stringing it
Right.
together.
So we cycle through the emotional experiences, and the feelings really are the language of the body. And then you tell your cells, okay, we're going to continually be in the cycle of depression. So you have to be willing to do what you have not done before to break the cycle.
Yeah.
And that can look very drastic. If that means, you just lock arms with somebody, be like, listen, I cannot be alone for the next 48 hours. We are going to be together,
really good.
and this is what we're doing. Or if that means, you play every sermon on our podcast and you listen to Moochie's voice. For an
I don't know how to
extended
respond to that.
I like your voice.
I would hope that you like my voice.
for an extended
Let me
period
turn
of
on
time.
my Barry Corey voice.
No, but it's real, because you have to do, because that's the thing, is like when we find ourselves in those spaces, we just want to live there because that feels so comfortable. But I'm telling you that comfort is not your friend.
Yeah.
Like that is, you have to do something different. And what God did with Elijah is he said, let me give you something different, because right now you're complaining. So just take a nap. And here's the thing about naps. Naps actually stops all momentum. Like physiological will stop all momentum. So if you're in a place of whatever, it's not just the bad stuff. It's the good stuff too. Because when you go to sleep, the hormones are different. The brain waves are different. So you're accessing different parts of your brain that you're not accessing when you're awake. Beta brain wave versus like a delta gamma. So
I just want you to know,
I knew he was going to say
because she said it so smoothly.
Because
Beta versus
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because here's the thing, right? When you are sleeping, when you're awake, like right now, we are in a beta brain wave. This means that we're conscious. We know exactly what's happening. When you first wake up in the morning, you're in an alpha brainwave state. So that means this is why quiet times in
You
the
went
morning.
to Ivy League school.
I did not. I went to the University of Miami.
Hey.
Go Canes. But when you wake, this is why quiet times in the morning are so special, because your brain is primed for auto-suggestion, meaning that what you're reading and as soon as you wake up in the morning, like what you read there, it sinks in a little differently.
It's Bible.
But my point is that you have the opportunity to choose a different thought when you wake up. You don't have to choose the anxiousness, the depressing thought, the sad thought. You can choose something different. And most people don't. We just go back to thinking about the thing that we were thinking about before we went to sleep. And so now we repeat the cycle over and over again. So what I think God did, at least in that story, when I read it, is God provided him a way out of the depression.
Yeah.
And God knows exactly what you need, but sometimes we don't receive that in a
step
way,
into it,
right?
yeah.
Like we don't receive that in a way that God wants us to, because there are things that are available to you that you can exercise. Gratitude and, let's say, anxiety can't exist in the same brain at the same time. You can be anxious or you can be in gratitude, and this is scientifically proven. I actually just read a study on it. So you can be one or the other, but we are so used to being, we make it home. We make it feel like, as we're talking about, it's like your friend. This is my friend now. My depression is my friend. My anger is my friend. My anxiety is my friend, because it's all we know. But I'm telling you, there's something so much better, but you have to do the drastic thing to explore and to access it, because all of it's available.
Yeah.
So
good.
I love that, particularly like God providing a way out, right? So in one sense, what we have to say is, if you are at a place where you don't want to be alive anymore, like that's
hard.
That's a hard place, and you need to hear from. We want you alive.
Yes, we want you here. We want you here.
Like, do not unalive yourself.
Yeah.
And God provides a way out that's better than that option. There's another option on the table. And what you identified, drawing in the Keen's story with Elijah, is the multi-faceted way that physically he helps Elijah, emotionally he helps Elijah, spiritually he helps Elijah. He says, here's a new way of seeing life, who I am and what I'm doing. And so I just think, yeah, there's options on the table. The courage to take them is needed. But man, if that's not you, but you know somebody who's there, then this is where you could step in and be courageous on their behalf and help them take the options that are on the table. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. So
I'll
thank you for
one
that.
more thing before, because I know we have to get to the next question, but if you are a person who feels God's calling, because I think a lot of people experience depression when when they don't truly understand a call, or when they get the call and they don't know how to explore it.
Ooh, we preached on that in a little bit.
It's going to be exciting.
That's a great series.
But I think if you are that person, and I've been there, like if you are that person who feels like a martyr in a sense, like everything is on me, or there's so much that I have to do and it's always on me, because that can feel very heavy. That's one way of looking at it. And it was my life coach one time that was like, Tracy, you can look at it that way, because I've been there. You can look at it that way, or you can say to yourself, because so much is on you, you need to make sure that you have systems and people and processes in place to be able to help you navigate it. Because you know that there's a lot of emotions running through feeling the leadership or feeling the calling, so you need to make sure that you access the things that God has given to you, instead of just victimizing yourself or martyring yourself in that space. And that thought really changed my mind and really forced me to make some of these drastic choices, so that, when I'm feeling this, and I do, I have tools, because this doesn't go away. You don't just you're not ever not depressed again. Happy all the time. That doesn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man,
What you said at the, I think it was you right at the beginning, or like what you do in the waiting. This is all of that.
Yes.
This is all of that. And then what you do when you're at that space, and it's not even a waiting for life to continue. You're trying to get the desire to wait back. This is also a part of that. It's very difficult, and it is a privilege to know that God was so good in his design to make community, so we don't always have to do that alone.
Because he knew.
Last thing, and then we can go to the next question.
For sure.
It's something that was sparked by what you were saying, and then accelerated what you said. But there's a preventative power that we have to tap into, right? And so depression, my prof said this, and I thought was really powerful. She was talking about depression and even burnout when you no longer have the resources to refresh you. There's a depletion of the resources that you need to actually be refreshed in life. And so there's a way where we could actually build into our life rhythms and resources that they don't eliminate, the potential of experiencing these moments in the waiting particularly, but they allow us to be better equipped when these moments find us, if I can say it that way.
Because they will.
Because they will find us, because if this is you are not alone. You don't have to be alone.
Man, I'm loving this conversation. But let's get into the final question for this series. Question number 4. When listening to community to address your blind spots, how do you handle it when they project their preconceived notions on you that may not apply to your situation?
Cringe. Cringe.
Just as a rule of thumb, I just affirm the humility that says we have blind spots. Let me just affirm that.
Yes.
To continue in that vein, if we're all seeking to understand before being understood, so what is this person communicating? Where are they coming from? What is going on? Before trying to just apply blah 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 blah. I just think it's a better way to operate that actually prevents this. So just my pastoral hat, let's affirm this heart, and then let's just all move in a way that we seek to understand before being understood. In view of that, if somebody is clearly projecting their situation onto yours, which means they're really not listening to you, it is okay to confront them in love and say, hey, man, I don't think you heard me. And then restate it. Give them the opportunity to maybe hear you differently and then respond accordingly. What I would hope we don't do is just, oh, yeah, you're not hearing me. Silence forever. Like I've now I've shut you down, can no longer talk to you. Maybe there's something going on. They maybe misheard. That's all I got.
This was probably one of my favorite questions from this time, which is not fair because I love them all. Because
definitely not fair.
Because as much as it's from the person who is receiving the challenge, I really think this question makes you should make you look as the person. Like if I were to read this about someone that I've given advice to, it makes me go, oh my God, wait a minute, what do I need
to understand?
Right, the seeking to understand. And then makes me go, well, what is actually my goal for the other person?
That's really good.
Is my goal for the other person for them to, I don't know, undo my past? I'm vicariously trying to live through them, or am I trying to so much control their journey that I'm not even walking with them in a way that isn't avoiding truth, isn't trying to water it down, but it isn't just choking out their own journey. And so I think as I'm listening, I'm like, man, it's so easy, especially to all of my mature believers, or you're mature in a specific area or stage of life, and you're wanting to give something. It doesn't mean that what you have isn't in value, but how you give it and what your actual goal is for maturation. Like when Paul, in all of the epistles, he makes it clear what the actual goal of maturation is in each of them, for each church, for each region, for each area. He's like, that you would, and it always led back to honoring the Lord and how that fleshes itself out in all relationships. It always came together with that. So I think that's the constant question, especially when you have the propensity, like if you know you're a gifted teacher, whether it's, I don't know, underwater basket weaving or basketball or whatever.
Underwater basket weaving.
Hey, there may be some passionate people that really do that. So whatever that thing is that you do, but you consistently, he just quietly finds a way to say things that distracts me. No, but seriously, whatever you are teaching,
what you want me to do
and whatever you are doing, if the end game is only for what you want, your self-gratification, your picture, and what you think is right, in a specific way, it has to be this way. It has to be this way. Not looking at God's word, not looking at the person, not interceding for them. I think you need to take a look at yourself.
Fall back.
So, yeah.
Fall back, Chief.
Well, I think there's a lot of nuance to the question because, in listening to community, what is your relationship with said community member?
Yep.
Right? Because there's a difference between somebody that just goes to church with you that doesn't know you, or somebody who's discipling you, mentoring you, or somebody who, is in a pastoral capacity or a leadership capacity. There's a lot of nuance to that question. So I think it depends, what you do would depend on that, because sometimes you can simply say, well, thank you for that. And then you can just move on.
And that's it. The end.
How would you do that without being disingenuous?
Because yes, that's a great question.
That's very much Denzel, Inside Man. Thank you, Mr. Bankrupt. which is like one of my favorite lines of all time.
I
And
think-
so, does that make sense though?
Like I think people will always have an opinion or a desire to speak into things that you're doing, things that you're not doing. I know that full well. I think that as you grow, you learn who you can sort of learn from, like who are those people that
That's
are
really good.
just very valuable that you trust their opinion about, and who are people that you can simply be thankful that they've said something, but you don't have to listen to everybody. And I think that's part of the problem, is that in the context of community, sometimes we think that everybody's opinion weighs equally, and it doesn't.
That's fair.
And so for me, I think
really
it would really just be like well, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm not sure that that's how I would receive that, but I'll give it some thought. And that's it. Like, and it's as simple as that. It doesn't have to be anything further. You don't have to say, no, that's wrong. I hate your stinking guts. Never talk to me again. We're over. Like, right. And then you storm out. It doesn't have to be that drastic. You can simply just say thank you and move on. And what I'm saying is that will happen multiple times over in the context of community.
Yeah.
No matter where you are in the community, it's going to happen a lot. So you have to have kind of those boundary bubbles, it's what I call them, boundary bubbles. Like, these are people who, like, I'm really going to value, like, if Diamond says something to me, I'm going to value that more than somebody who they may have just seen me walking around and they've never, so they're, and even the context of that relationship, I can ask for clarification. Like, I feel safe to be able to do that. Like, what did you mean? How did you mean that? That hurt my feelings. No, Diamond, I need time. I can have those conversations differently, but you don't have to listen to everybody. But I do think that there's a humility on your end too, to be like, is there something here for me? Let me pray about that. And that's an okay space to be in too.
Yeah.
That's good. I feel a synthesis coming on.
I don't have a synthesis.
No, it was
Does
for
it
me.
does it
And
have
it has
alliteration?
as well.
Oh,
So what
What's
I'm
our
here,
letter?
and the word,
The letter.
or the letter,
Yeah,
the letter begins with C, which is why I looked at you.
I love
C.
it.
There's a lot of things you can
Already
do with
like
C.
it.
Okay.
And so, first, what I hear us saying is you clarify.
oh, there it is.
So you seek clarity, which is seeking
Clarity.
to understand before being understood. Next, I hear us saying you consider.
Consider.
Consider. Do you see what we're doing?
having fun?
Which is consider carefully. That's two C's.
2 C's.
Which is this sense of humility. Let me actually see if what they're saying is making sense and transference isn't happening. That's me throwing a counseling term in there,
yes.
which is another
Okay.
C.
C.
And so you move from clarifying to considering carefully and maybe confronting courageously. You actually may have to say, let me check
Yeah.
you. And then
Maybe.
the last C is let it slide.
That's not a C.
It is today.
You can casually let it slide.
You should casually
Let it slide.
let it slide.
There it is.
And now we're done with question
There it
4.
is. I think that all of these like ideas, and I mean, that book needs to happen obviously, because now we got frameworks
these
for
letters.
everything.
Yeah.
Like, let's run it.
oh my
but
gosh.
before we conclude another C.
Oh,
Y'all
see what
that?
you did there.
Before we conclude, I just want to remind our guests and our listeners, well, one, thank you for making this conversation something that was really incredible. And I hope that, just through the dialogue that we were able to have, you're walking away fuller than you were before we started the conversation. And please share it with somebody who you think might be able to benefit from it. Also, just as a reminder, you can text in questions that you'd like to see answered in future Q&R conversations to the number 786-321-7090. And I wanted to toss it over to our heavyweights, our spiritual heavyweights, for any final thoughts before we go ahead and land the plane. Anything that y'all like to share with the people?
Any more letters?
Plane landed, man. I love it. Let's keep the conversation going.
See you next time. Yep.
See you next time.
Bye.
Stay blessed. Be a blessing.